This is Basket Case Clubs, CBR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. My name's Michael Connolly, and it is my pleasure to be your host as we now wrap up our mini-series all about making money. So this episode is actually part 2, which brings us to the conclusion of our not so mini Money Talks mini-series all about making lots of money. Man, that is a lot of M's. It's kind of like my mum makes me munch my mini M&Ms on a Monday morning. Anyway, this episode is kind of like, remember when they turned the book of the final Harry Potter book into movies, and it was so big they had to split it into 2 parts. So this is kind of our Deathly Hallows part 2, which continues on from our previous episode, which was part 1. So if you haven't already listened to that second last episode in this mini-series, I recommend you go and have a listen to that first, then come back here to catch the compelling conclusion. So this final episode's a bit about compounding. We've got more ideas for making money. We've got a little bit about how every little bit adds up. So there's this thing that we're going to go through about the 1% changes. If we make just a 1% increase in revenue, which by the way is very easy to do when you consider that you are in control of your pricing, that leads to a lot more than a 1% increase in profit, because the majority of what you're going to make when you increase your price, just that tiny little bit, goes straight to the bottom line, which is profit. So then the question is, well, do we increase our income by 1%, or do we try and decrease our costs by 1%, which will create a larger amount of growth for the organization? And the answer is, well, it's going to be the first one, but the real answer is, you know what? Why don't you try and do them both? Anyway, let's get into the episode where Steve's going to join me again. And this is full of the usual basket casey goodness. So hopefully this episode and all of the episodes in the mini-series that have come before are really going to help you identify areas where you can make lots more money so that you can achieve more growth. Remember, the self-limiting factor of not-for-profitness means that all of the good money that you make eventually is going to be reinvested in what you do in delivering on your purpose. Enjoy the episode. So let's get back to my compounding. Okay, so the concept here is that we've got sales of merchandise.
Yep.
If we want to increase sales of merchandise, we can also incentivize it. Now, a great way to incentivize it, and this is one of those ideas that I had mid-conversation, and unfortunately I forget who the conversation was with. I'm just so glad that I remember having the conversation. What a great idea it would be to say, on Friday night this week, we are going to give away some prize. Now, it might be a prize that was donated to us. It might be a jersey that's been signed by our firsts team. So it has some value. We are going to give that away to one lucky spectator who is wearing a club beanie and a club scarf. So if you would like to be that lucky spectator, all you got to do is make sure that you've got your scarf and beanie ordered in time so that you're wearing it on whatever Friday night it is.
Great.
So that's a raffle on top. And if you also want to buy tickets, you probably wouldn't in that case, but you can run another raffle at the same time. So this is where compounding works.
Yep.
The bar's open. The canteen is open. We're doing roving food sales. This is compounding. So it's not limited to what we can make as these little piles. These little piles stack up on top of each other. Then when we have the little 1%ers, so a little increase in price here, a little decrease in cost there, which bumps profit up, they all add up because we're actually stacking them up on top of each other. This is why I get excited, Steve.
But also just to check in on the reason that we're having this discussion. We're not having this discussion to promote bleeding crazy profits out of your customers. The reason that we're having these discussions is because everything that your club wants to do, maybe almost everything that your club wants to do, is going to cost money.
Yep.
So the reason that you're making profit, the reason that you're generating revenue, the reason that you're running a successful business is only to, as you said a couple of weeks ago, deliver on the objects in your constitution.
Purpose.
To deliver on your purpose.
Yeah.
So
the more cash we've got, the more we can do.
That's the confidence that's all the confidence that you as a management committee member should need to make the right decision when it comes to capitalizing on these opportunities to actually make a shitload of money.
Yep. So I'm trying to wrap this up into a nice, neat little bow. Which is going to be
Into a basket
extremely
casey bow.
a little basket casey bow. It's going to be extremely difficult. So work with me here. So we've talked about things like raffles. Now, the only other thing I want to add about raffles is that in most states and territories, while you don't need a license to run a raffle, you very well may be required to keep good records. It's very easy to keep those records, but you need to keep the records. So make sure you are. So find out from your office that looks after whatever the gaming regulation or the legislation is for charitable games or games of chance for clubs. Make sure you're abiding by it. From a bang for buck perspective, I also want to touch on the drives concept. So, you know, the Lamington drive, or the pie drive, or the chocolate drive. You know, when your kids come home with a big box of chocolates and they've got to sell all the chocolates. You know who makes the money out of those chocolate drives?
Cadbury.
Yes, Cadbury or Mars, whoever's running it, they make the money. And I've got a bit of a problem with not seeing the actual business model. So the actual business model here is ingenious for Cadbury and Mars. It's great.
They sell a shitload more chocolates than they would without
and what does it cost them?
Being guilted into it.
Just a tiny little bit. And the parents get guilted into it, and then they've got chocolate in the house that they might not want. Now, I don't eat a lot of chocolate. It's because I have an inflammatory problem.
Chocolate drive time.
Well, I have an inflammatory problem with chocolate. I kind of get inflamed around the middle. I eat too much of it.
Yeah, joke face on. I could tell it was going somewhere.
And unfortunately, now that we've got this video running, for those of you who are actually watching
that's
from
joke
video,
face.
you can see it. That's joke face. The problem that I've got is that there's a business model here that we get sucked into, and we say, oh, we can run a drive. It's a great fundraising opportunity. You'll make a little bit of money. But what's the cost? The cost is time. It's going to cost a lot of time to be able to run that drive. And the company that's making the proper money out of it is Cadbury or Mars Confectionery Co.
And they're spending none of that time.
They're spending none of the time. They're just paying a very little bit of money to buy a lot of time from your kids to wander around and sell chocolates on the bus. Or you're going to pay for them anyway. So while I don't think it's a bad idea, I just want you to look into it before you jump into these things. Look into the value of what you're doing, because it might actually be great value for somebody else. If you've got a good model around it and it's going to work, or if it's something that you do because it's a driver for getting people to an event, awesome. That's great, but you know the strategy behind it. And the strategy isn't simply give all of the money to Coles, which we do when we're buying for the canteen, to Mars or Cadbury. So it's about thinking through it. The other part that we don't need to touch on again, but we do need to mention, is grants. Grants are very different, and they're not necessarily a way to make money. They're a great way to get shit done, but they're not a great way to make money. So go and listen to the episode. I think it's called How to Get Grants, Forget About Grants, and where we talked about something to that effect. Jess, you can put a link to it in the description. It's where we said you actually have to have a great project. So have a great project with great planning, and then you'll get a grant. It'll be connected to it like that. But
again, because you'll be driven by your purpose.
Your
project is going to be focused on delivering your objects and why you exist as an organization in the first place. And then the application will write itself.
So I just had to scroll down because I knew there was one more. And it's one that we don't need to touch on much more. Do you want to know what it is?
Putting your prices up.
So we're not saying go out and put your prices up. We're saying take a deliberate approach and make decisions as appropriate.
And do it every year, at least.
Well, yes, there should always be movement in fees, but if you find out, because we've got a great tool that is, it's a very, very
have a look every year. Yes, don't necessarily.
No, I think it should move every year.
Even if only marginally.
Even if only CPI.
Because you're building them.
Or 3%, because we don't actually know what CPI is and how it impacts sport. Try and figure that out. It's tough. I've never been able to nail it down to say, well,
can my football go in my basket of goods?
What is it? And do I need to buy a football as a product, or is it's a servant? So about 3%. So at a minimum, you should have prices that are moving, because it just avoids fee stagnation. So where we started with our sister, and yes, her name is Michelle. So do you think mum and dad always wanted a boy named Michael? I don't know. No, I don't think so, because there's an Anthony between the Michelle and the Michael. Anyway, it was confusing for at least
Michael and Michelle. Yes,
certainly for us. Yes. I still get emails from Michelle. People don't know how to spell our names. Anyway, we love you, Mum and Dad. There are plenty of names. I'll just leave it there. And who would have got the good one, though? Would I have been Julian? Would I have liked to have been a Julian? I used to want to be called a Julian. Anyway, we're not saying go out and put your prices up. We're saying take a deliberate approach. So we've got a great tool. It's a very simple Excel spreadsheet that has 4 tabs on it. In the first one, it's income, expenditure, and then the calculator, and then a pie chart. But the income and expenditure tab, and this is the crux, it separates out what is the money that we're definitely going to make when people join as a member versus what is all of the money that we're going to make from all of these other ideas that we've talked about. We haven't even touched
If people
on
want to
sponsorship
spend
this
money on it.
episode.
Yes. No, we
If
haven't.
people want to. So our sponsorship, separate business unit, canteen, separate business unit, bar, separate business unit, merchandise, separate business unit. It's very hard to say separate business unit multiple times in a row without spitting. So we've got all of these separate business units that are great ways to make money, but they are all discretionary. So the only time that you get to make money to cover the costs of what you do, so the costs of the service that you're providing should be covered by that income, is membership fees.
Yep.
There might be a little bit for gate takings if you charge a gate.
Clinics,
Yeah,
academies.
yeah,
Yep.
game fees if you don't charge all of that in one lump sum at the front. But that's it. But then when you look at the list of expense items that you've got to pay, because it's not just about fielding a team for a season of sport, it's also about running the business. So to be an incorporated association, to be not-for-profit, there are accountancy fees, marketing fees. There are all leasing fees. Well, leasing connects to the field, but there are other things that are not directly connected, but they're directly connected to us being an entity that can provide a season of sport. So we have to cover all of those costs as well. The only chance we're guaranteed to be able to say we can include this in the price, because people have to pay it to be able to play it, is that membership fee.
Yep.
So it's really important that you take a good, hard, critical look. And that's what this tool does. It divides out the other business units from the core business, which is where we have to make money, and our core expenses. So our fixed expenses, the things that we have to pay whether we want to or not. The calculator then says, okay, so when we take out all of the ancillary stuff, are we actually running at a profit? While we might have a bottom line profit, do we actually have that bottom line profit? And then the pie chart is a great way to sell it, because it only displays our expenses for our mandatory expenses, the things that we must spend money on. And you can see that there are lots of wedges to that pie. But if somebody complains, then you can sit with them and say, well, we've done an analysis and we don't think there's any wedges from this pie that we can take out. Do you think that there are some? And I, as the committee member, might say, look, this big wedge here at 13% of expenses is for our presentation day. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And that gives a great opportunity for somebody who might have just been grumpy a minute ago to say, oh, no, we love the presentation.
Can't take that away.
No, the kids love it, man. We love what you guys are doing. So we've turned them from Grumpy George into a great supporter. And then they can't see how they could take anything out. I don't support justifying every dollar.
Yep.
So I have used the analogy to say that I happened to find myself recently at the Lamborghini dealership in the Valley in Brisbane. It was a cool day, Steve. You should do it. It was good fun. I didn't buy a Lamborghini. I wasn't actually there shopping for Lamborghinis. But while I was there,
I did have a bag which I pretended was full of cash.
yeah, big dollar sign on it. Did you wear a mask and a stripy shirt? Oh, not once does anyone walk into the Lamborghini dealership or the Bentley dealership or the Ferrari dealership and say, open the bonnet. And they open the bonnet, they say, oh, that's right, the engine's not there. Come around the back and open the back up. And they open the back up and they look at the engine and they say, now come down here on the passenger side and look at this rear engine mount bush on the passenger side.
How much is that?
How much of the $850,000 that I'm paying for this car goes to that? So I'm calling bullshit on poor committee members having to justify every single dollar that gets spent by our customers for where that goes. I don't mind the pie chart, and in our spreadsheet, it only divides it by percentage. So it says, because it doesn't matter, because if you've got a problem with somebody who wants to question the value of the bush on the rear engine mount on the passenger side, or how much is going to our peak body, or how much is going to insurance, or how much is going to water for the field,
if you've got to justify it down to that granular a level, you've got a branding problem. This is not actually a money problem. You've got a branding problem. If your customers are that grumpy that they can't see the value in what you're providing, and maybe to wrap this up in the nice, neat little bow, we go right back to where we start, and it's all about mindset. So if it's all about mindset, it's the mindset of the committee members who are here thinking, gee, this is expensive because I think it's shit how much I have to pay when I'm joining this club. And that's not a good mindset, because then you're on the back foot and you're very negative in all of your discussions with all of your customers. So it's about being positive. And this can be confrontational when this happens, but also to be able to say, hey, this is a great value club. Let's talk about what your kids get out of it. Let's not talk about the cost of this engine mount bush or the cost of how much we're paying on insurance or water. Let's talk about the value that your kids are getting. Is it a pathway club? So is this about the pathway to the Olympics or the World Cup? Or is this about participation and the smile that's on their faces and the fact that they are the ones dragging you here? The reason we don't have those conversations, Steve, is that they're the hard conversations to have. They call these, in human resources management, soft skills. Can you believe that? They're not soft skills. These are hard skills because they're freaking difficult. People aren't good at having these conversations. If people were better at having these conversations, or at least being able to deflect them, purely because they start from the right place and have the right mindset themselves, it becomes far easier. I feel like we might have landed.
The eagle has landed. One further wrapping up of this discussion into the bow of which you speak. I think it's important just to point out that our little spreadsheet tool that you mentioned, as well as presenting the pie chart, identifies on a per member basis, and this is a broad brush approach that it prompts people using the tool to take, to identify what the shortfall per member is in terms of what they're charging and what the costs associated with each member look like. So we don't advocate, if that's a red number, which it almost always is. We don't advocate for just increasing your membership fees by that dollar overnight. You made this point earlier that any change has to be, it has to be a transition, a gradual transition. It's a journey, as you say. But also, a really important consideration is that all of that other non-sport related or ancillary income, don't just look at that red amount and say, oh, we've got to put our fees up by that much. Rather, acknowledge the importance of having the discussion about your fees and raising your prices, as we've just talked about, and having a critical discussion regularly enough about whether you're charging enough, especially given that the operating environment of our sporting clubs is very similar to the operating environment of all other businesses for whom the cost of doing business is increasing at a rapid rate of knots.
Yeah, so while the cost of living for our customers is going up, we can't necessarily wear that because the cost of living for our business is going up as well.
Absolutely. But this, the way that I wanted to use this little tool to help with the tying up in the bow is that shortfall also identifies the importance, because a lot of these clubs are still trading profitably. They're still making more money than they're spending each year, but there's a per member shortfall when we compare only the sport related income and the sport related expenditure. So what that highlights is the importance of all of these other things that we're doing to make money. Our canteen, our bar, our merchandise, our events, considering that we do have multiple business units and that we've got a captive market who we should be absolutely servicing in the best possible way, but also billing for the services that we're delivering to them in a manner that is reasonable.
There we go.
Brilliant.
Now, this is not the first time we've talked about this.
Nor will it be the last, I suspect.
It will definitely not be the last, but it's certainly not the first. And the reason that I know it's certainly not the first is because the episode was titled Socks and Sausages. And I refer to it all the time now. You don't want to be selling socks and sausages to fund your operating expenses, those fixed costs that you know you're going to have to pay for a season of sport. Steve, this journey has been a bit of a roller coaster. It's had its highs. It hasn't really had some lows, but it has had some very.
We cut those out there in the blooper reel.
They're in the
You're
blooper-
all welcome. You
It-
don't have to put up with those.
It has had some realizations about purpose.
Mm.
So we're talking about money and we're talking about making money, but why do you make money? You don't exist to make money. Not-for-profit exists not to make money, but for purpose. And it's being really clear about that purpose and understanding that making profit is where growth lives. So if you just want the status quo, then keep doing everything you've been doing. Just the incremental increases in fees that we've talked about just now will be all you need. But if you aren't doing things that you want to do, like the scholarship program for kids in the bush, that's the sort of thing that only profit can buy, because you have to kick the can. We mentioned grants only very briefly, but grants can contribute to projects, but so will you. You'll have to contribute to those. You can't expect everyone who doesn't even like your sport, ratepayers and taxpayers, to just fund it miraculously because you're there. There's other things that we need to be spending money on: roads, education, healthcare, mental health care. All of these things are critically important. Sport's really important as well, but not as important to everyone as much as it is to you, perhaps. You have to therefore kick the can. If you want to be able to go to some of the university campuses. Now, I studied at the University of Queensland, and the old place where I used to park that was a Dust Bowl car park is now a multi-level car park. And you know what's on the roof? A synthetic hockey field. You know what's on the roof of the car park next door? A synthetic football field. That is awesome. If you ever want to be in a position, and admittedly, the University of Queensland is like a $2 billion a year business. But if you ever want to be in a position to be able to do that, do you think government's going to pay for it? Do you think grants are going to pay for it? Or do you think you're going to have to kick the can? Mindset shift, baby. That's where it starts and that's where it ends. Steve, this has been so much fun. I really hope that every maxi mini series that we do has as many great points as this one has. This has been really, really good. It's been a surprise to me how deep we've been able to dig. So thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. I've enjoyed these several months of maxi series episodes.
That's been several months.
And
yes.
I look forward with great anticipation of embarking upon the next journey of Basket Casey goodness.
It'll be Basket Casey goodness, all right. Thanks, of course, to Jess for making us not only sound great, but look great as well. If you're not already following us on social media, of course you're already following us on social media. You know what's there. Tell it to your friends. And if you missed the webinar that we did a few weeks ago now, then go and have a look at our website, send us an email or contact us form via our website, and we'll send you a copy of the recording so that you can share that with other members of your committee. The last thing I want to ask you to do is really, really important. And I'm only asking you this because you're an awesome person. Please subscribe to the podcast and please give us a review. If you give us a review, not only will it enable other people who might be looking for this sort of information to be able to find us and connect with us for all of the wonderful information that we can share that doesn't come from us, it comes from all of the great people that we've had the pleasure of working with over 27 years. We only recently finished 27. But it could also win you some great merch. So we'll do another lucky draw for some great Basket Case Clubs merch for somebody who leaves a great review. Steve, thanks. See you next time. And thanks to everyone else. See you again soon.
See you later.
Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.